Alrighty, why don't we do it this way this time so we don't get confused? Why doesn't everybody pass your story about Columba? Brendan, I'm sorry. Okay. To the front. Pass it, just everybody pass it to the person up here, yes. Okay, people forget things.
Get me out of this stinking fresh air.
So,
I forgot to add
you tried to add or you got to mark it? Okay, thank you. Hey guys, we're too loud, because I can't even hear them, and they're right here. So go ahead, everybody from Jaden over, just pass your papers to the person next to you. And then from Jonathan over, pass your papers here, if you haven't already. And looks like I have a file. And after I give them all, I will give your papers back to you. And I will make a couple of observations. It looks like this is pretty easy for everybody. It's not too tough, it's not working out real hard. Is that a paper that's coming to me? Okay. I'm still waiting on them. We're good. We have plenty of time. All right. So here's something I noticed, and I might have written this on your papers last week. And by the way, you are going to have to forgive me this semester. Sometimes it's going to sound like I'm a little goofy, and here's why. Because you guys started so incredibly early this year, my classes that I teach didn't start until the next Tuesday. And so that means yesterday I taught to kids what I taught you last Wednesday. And now I'm teaching you new stuff. But then I'll teach what I'm doing here next Tuesday. You see, so I'm a little confused about, did I tell this group that? What, you see what I mean? So after Christmas, we will be in sync. Like I will teach the same thing Tuesday, Wednesday, and I will kind of be on track. So it's not that I don't pay attention or don't know what's going on. It's that sometimes I just said completely different things to kids yesterday, and I forget, which week we're on. I mean, I know what we're talking about, but I think it was writing week we're on. So if you put your P in a place that I didn't really ask you to put it, I probably moved it. So, if it was like written in the paper somewhere, I might have put it in the margin. Let me find somebody this is Bentley's paper. I'm outing Bentley. There's a lovely P in the margin. That's great. But here's the most interesting thing that happened. And if this is if you did this, don't worry, because about at least half of you did this, which is interesting. You started telling a story in the past tense. So Saint Columba, went here. He did this. He saw this. Then suddenly it turned into present tense. And then he is doing this, and he does this, and he says this. Now, here's the deal with telling stories. Often we put the whole thing in the past tense, because obviously Columba lived 1,600 years ago. They're all dead and gone. This happened a long time ago, so we use the past tense. Sometimes when we're telling a story, we just use the present tense for the whole thing, like it's happening now, like you're visiting it like in a time machine, And that's fine too. It's called the historical present. The thing is, choose one and stick with it, because when you suddenly move to a different tense, it's very jolting. Yes, Jason?
Could you say, like someone, or say Brendan noticed that he is on a wheel or was on a wheel?
We would probably say he was. He noticed that he was. He notices that he is. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, or we're just not, it can be whatever you want it to be, but it's not a point of argument. Does that make sense, Jaden, to keep them the same? Yeah, or.
So like when you're reading the story and like the character is having a flashback or something, sometimes they use it and they say like, he had said
Mhm.
he was doing, I don't know.
This is very,
Mostly just had.
and you know what that's called?
Had verb.
Maybe from Latin, you know, if you do that verb tense in Latin. So we have, this is good, let's just take a moment to talk about this, since everybody was doing this. So we have present tense, we know those verbs. Let's say says, all right, let's just use say as our, he says. And then obviously we know the future, he will say. But past, well, actually we're gonna visit future again too. Past tenses, future tenses too, branch out. So, for example, he said he wanted pizza for breakfast. That's gonna be our sentence. Who doesn't want pizza for breakfast? Good. But what if, hey guys, what if something happened before he said this? He had already eaten a dozen bagels when he said he wanted pizza for breakfast. This is when we use that helping verb had. It is called the past perfect, or in Latin they call it the pluperfect. And this is when two things already happened, but one of them happened first. So tell me something you did this morning.
I ate breakfast,
Well, tell me something you did before that.
brushed my teeth.
Okay, so Jaden had brushed his teeth when he ate breakfast. And now I know the order that it came in. This happens in future too. They do it a lot in Latin, but maybe we don't do it so much in English. If two things haven't happened yet, but one of them will happen first. Jaden will have brushed his teeth when he will eat breakfast. When he will put his whatever. And so it's very intricate. And sometimes we don't think about it. I'm not trying to be that intricate on your papers. It's just sort of, we slipped between says and said, in your papers. But that's a good point, that we have ways of saying that in the past or in the future, two things are going to happen or did happen, but one of them happened first. And we can indicate which one happened first. Yeah, Zachary.
Is that like a past participle or something? Or is that just a different thing?
That's a different, past participle is a different, are you thinking in Latin or in
I'm thinking.
English? So a participle is when we take a verb and just make it an adjective.
Oh.
So said isn't very good to do that with. Okay, blow. I've seen the tree blow. Blowing is gonna the blown tree, or the blowing tree. Now it's an adjective. It tells me what kind of tree. It's not a verb anymore.
Or
And then,
like
Okay, got it.
saying somebody was loved, where you use the verb as an adjective. Instead of adjective.
yeah, we could arm wrestle this out, Oren, but someone was loved. I would still say the whole verb was loved. It had a helping verb and a main verb, and I would call love part of the verb. I call it a passive verb. Anyway, we don't have to get into the, except I love it. I love grammar so much. Okay,
I don't.
so I will bring your papers around. This is good. Okay, I'm looking at it.
Well, this one she did, the last one.
Xander.
No, I'm Zach, not David.
I knew it was a Z. Why are they having trouble with you? I don't know.
Hey, who am I?
I'm sorry.
Who
Okay,
am I?
Jade. I know. You know why? Because you drew all over your thing.
Wait, who all over?
Your thing. I don't know why I don't remember that with Nathan, but. Caleb.
Yeah, okay.
My car is so much better now.
Fine.
I like music.
You may personalize the card.
Let's do this.
We can still do that.
I don't know.
And then
Why is
I'm
Michael?
looking into like the, I got this.
And that,
Thank you.
and Clara Okay, so I have one with no name.
Oh, that might be mine.
Is it yours?
Yay.
Sounds like a big size at home.
Hey, I think I need one. I'm so good at this.
What? Sean? Oh, it's still sitting here. You didn't want to come home? Thank you for telling me. Okay, oh, awesome, thank you. So, oh, yes, okay, I'm good. All right. So all right, okay, I guess I should ask this first. Did I write anything on anyone's paper and you don't know why? And that could be as simple as I crossed out a comma and I said, I don't think you need a comma there. Or I added one and you don't know why. There's no silly question.
Why did the P say with one?
Because I thought you did a good parallelism. I liked the parallelism. So if I point at something and I say nice, or good one, or awesome, it means that thing I'm pointing to. I really like that. I really like that.
Again.
Okay. Well, here's what you should do. Be like an old person like me and write yourself a note. When at the top of your reading questions for next week, or at the top of the story that we're going to retell, write parallelism. And then I have to circle it and put stars next to it, and so that I don't ignore my own notes.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
do.
what I did.
Yes. Okay, if there are no questions, we are going to do one more of this kind of paper, and then we're moving on. So if this is really too easy or you don't love it, great, do it one more time and it's done. If you really, really love it and you hate to say goodbye to it, I'm so sorry, but this is the last one we're doing and we're moving on to something different for a few weeks. But I want to ask you guys a serious question. Does everybody feel like if you read a story, you could make your own outline? You do not have to agree just from peer pressure. Just because everyone else said yes doesn't mean you can't say no. Are we all? Because I'm quite serious.
Well, if it's incredibly long, then no.
It is a slightly longer story, but remember what we're doing. We're asking ourselves, who's in this story? Where do they live? When do they live? That's easy to ask yourself, right? And jot it down. Then you're asking yourself, what's the problem? What are they trying to do? What do they want? What do they need? What are they trying to make happen? And jot down a few notes on that. And then your last paragraph is, how does it all end up? How do they reach a solution? And they do reach a solution in the story I'm going to give you. It's not a nasty story.
I
It's
actually
depressing.
read it.
The Charlemagne and the Robber?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
fun to get it.
And, okay, so in your reading guide, on page 12, starting on page 12, it goes for several pages, but please do not be, it's a very simple story, really. It's not,
Yeah.
they just include a lot of details. This is a story about something that supposedly happened to Charlemagne, whom we are going to discuss today.
Yay.
What I want you to do, now listen very carefully, because if you don't, you're going to end up doing way more work than you have to do. Now that made everybody listen. Like we don't want to do more work than we have to do.
That'd be fun.
All I want you to do this week is make an outline. You do not need to write the paper. Do you hear? I just want you to make an outline. And I want you to bring the outline next week and show me. And I'm not going to keep it because you need it to write your story. I'm going to walk around and I'm going to glance over everybody's outlines and make sure we're good. Okay, yes.
Should we do 3 paragraphs again?
3 paragraphs, a 3-paragraph outline, exactly like the ones we've been doing. Caleb.
Can I write the story so I don't have to do it?
Well, if you will take care and time to do it and include your parallelism, all right? I have had students, here's why I do it this way. I guess I don't need to explain myself, but I do. Sometimes it's just a lot of work. Some students who are still working on their writing, it's just a lot to go through and make an outline and write the whole paper and, but does everybody understand? All I really want to see from you is an outline of this story in 3 paragraphs. If your outline needs help, I will help you with it next week.
Outline in 3 paragraphs.
Outline in 3 paragraphs, yes. Exactly, it's exactly the same thing, Jonathan. We've done this is the 4th time. This is the 4th time. You do not have to limit it to 4 points. You know, it can have 5 or 6. That's not a magic number. You can make your paragraph longer if you want to. Take it down. Not shorter than the Roman numeral and then 1 through 3. Give it at least up to 3. Okay, but if you need 5 or 6. Are we good?
Yeah.
Any questions about that?
No.
But, no.
No, there's no need for heart attack. You feel that you're calm and cool. No heart attack. All right. I had you guys read about the Franks. So,
That's what I did.
so Orin knows all about them. Would you turn with me to the back of your books on page 81, where there's a map? And you kind of have to turn it sideways, you know, because it's on its end. We looked at this before. Hey guys, stay with me. When we have talks, I can't talk, okay? But I'm going to let you guys talk. I promise I won't talk for the next hour, but it makes it such a bit easier. All right. And you guys are so far away from me, I can't like throw things at you. I'm not going to throw things. I had a teacher throw something at me
At least one to watch.
in school. I think high school. He threw a piece of chocolate at me. And I always paid attention. It was just I was asking my neighbor something about what was on the board, and he threw a piece of chocolate at me and it skipped off the desk.
You're like,
Oh, at least he did. or else it
She
would've
did
been
miss.
close.
Okay. I will not do that, by the way. So look at the map and find, you know, the place that is France today, the area that is France today. And you will see a lot of it says Kingdom of the Franks. Does everybody see Kingdom of the Franks?
yep.
It's got a sideways
Yeah, I
diagonal line. And this is in the year 500. So, in the time when the Roman Empire is falling apart, you know, one of these German groups of people that came in were the Franks. And initially they took over, but while we're looking at that map, I just want to point something out. By the time of Charlemagne, 800 years later, or 300 years later, they had taken over what is marked as Kingdom of the Burgundians, Alemanni, and half of the Kingdom of the Ostrogoths. Now, some of that is France today, and can you see how we call France because they were Franks? Mm-hmm.
Because they also have.
I have no idea what it's called France. I
Right?
do not believe they are related to France in any way.
They eat
But-
lots of hot dogs.
But a lot of what he took over is Germany today. Germany and Austria. And, it was a huge kingdom. Okay, that's enough of that now. I just wanted to point out where we're talking about. So these Germans came in. I didn't ask you a question about this, but I want to talk about it because it's weird and cool. The Romans had ruled a lot of that land for hundreds of years. And they had Roman rules of law and custom. And these German guys came in and they had strange ways of doing things. They were super hyped up about being warriors, first of all. Like, what's the path? Okay, if you're a Roman, what's the path to be an important, well-known Roman? I'm going to learn to be a good public speaker, and I'm going to be in the Senate, and I'm going to make a political name for myself, right? If you're a German, how do you become a great guy? Just grab some weapons.
Go crazy. Grab a club.
Grab some weapons and go crazy, yes.
Yeah,
Go after
exactly. Like take a club.
And so the Germans came in and they had this idea, you know, like we're gonna, okay, so for example, because you guys know something about this, you're gonna know more in a couple of months. But think of the gods like Odin and Thor and Loki. Think of those sorts of gods. and what they do. And then think of
Don't forget about the movies.
Apollo and Diana and the Roman gods.
They don't.
They're kind of chill. Not always, Zeus has thunderbolts, not always chill, but relatively chill. And Odin and Thor and Loki and the rest of that crew, they're not chill at all. And that's what these people were like. They came into what used to be Roman and they transformed it because they didn't want to be sitting in the law courts of the Senate and having, public debates. They wanted to go smash someone's head in. Yes.
Making me think of Rick Riordan.
Oh.
So,
Mhm.
not that much. Referencing every single book
Mhm.
he's ever made.
Well, now you know where he gets his material.
There's a lot of.
So I wanted to start about what Dorothy Mills talked about first, because everybody loves to talk about this because it's just so crazy. It says, German laws differed from Roman law and the law of today in the matter of trials. Going to court. There was no trial in the modern sense of the word. You, Hans, have done something nefarious and terrible, and we are taking you to court. And you will have witnesses, and you will stand before the judge, and you will make your case, and they will prosecute you. And no, not going to do that. Not going to do that. Yes, Nathan.
So the outline is just the keyword outline, right?
Yes, just the outline. Yes, that's all I want you to do, and then bring it. Don't forget it. Bring it. When you get it done, stick it in your bag right away, so I can look at it. You're looking at me like, do you understand?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
You just have okay, so here's what we do to Hans if he's done something nefarious and terrible. We have some choices. The first one is called compurgation. It says, compurgation consisted in the swearing by the accused and a certain number of other persons that he is innocent. All right, come on, Hans. I don't literally do it, but you're going to stand here and tell me, and you're going to say, I promise you I didn't do it. Okay. You got anybody else who says you didn't do it? Yeah. Jonathan and Oren and Caleb, they all
If I
swear
say
he
it
didn't do it.
Definitely did
You
it.
didn't do anything
Okay,
wrong.
and you all say he didn't do it. Okay,
Definitely did it.
Hans may be just as guilty as can be, but if he gets enough people to say he's innocent, then okay, you can go.
So you just gotta have a big bend.
The whole family.
No,
comes
you have
court
to
and says,
have
yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really big
But-
eyes with the cute puppy smile.
But it depends on how important a person he is. Maybe Hans is, oh yeah, maybe. Let's say he killed a nobleman. I'm sorry, Bentley, you are not going to be our nobleman, but you're dead, so it was a short-lived glory.
I don't think they had guns.
It says a noble, listen, because this is really weird. A noble, for the murder of a noble, required 11 compurgators of his own rank. Okay, if he kills a nobleman like Bentley, 11 people, 11 noblemen have to say he didn't do it. But I'm sorry now, who's going to be the unlucky one? I feel like it's going to be,
Me.
oh, you what? Asher.
I wanna
We're
be-
going to pick Asher.
Yeah.
Asher.
Asher is
You're a
unlucky.
serf. You're a serf. You're poor as dirt. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. But Hans has murdered you. He only has to have 5 people claim he's innocent.
He's a poor Joe.
Do you see what happens? If he kills Bentley, 11 people have to say he's innocent. Kills poor Asher, only 5. Asher's only worth 5. And that was the trial.
That makes
Okay, 11 people, 5 people, whatever the quota was. All right, you may go. You may go. Yeah.
What if they didn't have enough?
Then I guess they get punished.
How?
And the person.
Probably
Wait,
brutally. I don't know exactly, but I do know they were fond of like maiming people.
What if this side only has 3 people and this side only 9 people? What happens then?
Well, it
Do they
depends on,
gather more witnesses? Or do they just kill all?
well, no, it just, if you don't have the quota of witnesses that you need. And, okay, here's the thing. We're using the term witness, not witness. Like, we don't even cross-examine to see if you were there. How do you know Hans didn't do it? He's not that kind of person. He would never do something like that.
No, he definitely would.
Okay, okay.
Yes, I know him too.
All right, so if you like that one, you're gonna love this one. And I bet you have heard of this one. It's trial by ordeal. Trial by ordeal consisted in submitting to some kind of physical ordeal. The accused would be required to carry a piece of red-hot iron a certain distance or plunge his arm into boiling water. If at the end of a given time, generally 3 days, he showed no ill effects, he was judged innocent, for it was believed that God would not allow an innocent man to suffer, and if necessary, he would save him by miracle. Okay, okay, so you see the burning coal, we know, burning coals with nails, burning nails sticking straight up. Walk around for a while, and then check back in a couple days and see how your feet are doing. And if your feet are all blistered and sore, I'm sorry, you did it. You so did it. But if he comes back and like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. No problem. Like, okay, he must be innocent.
I would feel so bad for him.
Wear some shoes.
He's gonna do that.
Paint on your feet.
All right.
And
Then maybe you'll like this one best of all. This is the third way. Bentley, you have been resurrected.
Yeah.
Hans and Bentley are noblemen, and Bentley, we'll make you cross the Hans out because he killed you earlier. Hans stole 20 pounds of gold from you.
wow,
Whoa.
that's a lot of gold.
And Hans doesn't want to do the witnesses thing, the congregation, because he can't find enough people, because Hans is kind of a jerk to his friends and they won't stand up for him. So he says, okay, Bentley says, all right, ordeal, and Hans is kind of a coward. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. Sorry, I'm picking on you, Jay. Okay, duel. So we're going to fight it out. Grab your sword, fight it out right here in the middle. And then the idea is whoever wins, God made them win. That's the idea. That it's not just which one is stronger. It's that God won't let an innocent person suffer. Does that make sense to you guys? So this was I mean, we're just so used to weighing the facts. Today, if Hans stole 20 pounds of Bentley gold, I don't know where Bentley
And
got 20
then,
pounds of gold.
Fine, or then
We would look for clues. We would dust for fingerprints. We would search Hans's belongings. We would interview anyone who might have seen something suspicious. It just seems very logical. But for them, this wasn't logical at all. It was, God will protect the innocent. So let her rip. Walk on the hot coals or fight it out with a duel. And God will protect you. Somebody, was it Jaden? Somebody had a question? Somebody had, was it Nathan? Have you forgotten? I saw a hand and then it went away.
Oh yeah, it
I don't
was
remember
me.
him.
How's that even transformed from people going from dueling it out to the trials we have today?
I mean, those are the Germanic tribes. We probably got it
Figured out
from the
technology.
Byzantine Empire, maybe.
Yeah, okay. This was excellent question and excellent idea. Yes, the old Roman law was much more like our law.
Okay.
But you got to remember this was, there was maybe 1,000 years between this, more than 1,000 years, and the Renaissance or the early modern world. And I hate to tell you the biggest thing, Jaden, because it's depressing. People stopped believing so much that God would protect the innocent. I know. Sometimes they saw it didn't really work. Do you know what I mean? Somebody you knew was guilty still suffered, and people started thinking about that. But after the Reformation, and as we got closer to modern times, people just stopped making God so much a part of their plans or their worldview, if you know what I mean, of the way they saw things. And people stop believing God steps in and does that sort of thing. They stop believing in the miraculous. I hate to tell you that because it's a depressing thing to say to you, but I think it's the truth. It's a really good question. It certainly didn't happen overnight. And for a long time, there were both things kind of, both ideas were hovering together. This idea of law and order and trials, and also this crazy, we're going to duel it out. In fact, I think they were still dueling in France and Europe into the 1800s.
Whoa.
I think it was made illegal in the 1800s or early 1900s. At that point, it was pistols. Have you ever seen pistols at 10 paces? You know what I mean? Like, you've offended my honor, and then we stand back to back. Have you seen this in a movie? And we walk 10 paces away, and then we turn around, we each take a shot at each other.
No, I saw it, and
Yes, because Hamilton, obviously. Yes.
Actually, I heard recently that this one guy got divorced and like he found like in the laws somewhere that he and his wife could do a duel. Like it wasn't like revised or anything.
that's not true.
So I don't think that they actually like killed each other or anything because that'd be weird.
That,
But like
that's gotta be.
I think he found it somewhere in the laws. So
Yeah.
just a
Well,
couple
I
years
mean,
ago.
mentioning Hamilton is a good, because there's a duel. You know what I mean?
There's like
Um,
5.
So it didn't disappear right away. But when we read about it, we think, well, that is nuts. Something you might, ordeal that you might be familiar with is witch trials. Have you ever heard stories where somebody is suspected of being a witch and they throw them in the water? And it's sort of like, if you sink, you must be innocent. Unfortunately, we hope we rescue you before you drown. But if you float, that's weird. And you must be a witch. So now we take you out of the water and we kill you. This is a lose-lose situation if you can't swim, or even if you can swim, because then you'll float, and then they'll say you're a witch. That would be a form of trial by ordeal.
downwards.
Yeah, swim downward and away as far as you can. Hold your breath if you're ever
But then
accused
you
of being a
just
witch.
naturally float back up.
There's another way of the witch trials where you would lay on a board, another board, and then they start piling on rocks. on
Yes.
top of the board.
Until they crush you.
Yeah.
Or if you're innocent, presumably you won't be crushed. And that's the same idea that God will protect you if you're innocent of witchcraft.
How many rocks would you put on there? Because they're gonna crush after a point.
They were, even after the Reformation, they were crushing people to death. They were doing that. Just like Micah had to say that.
Also in the witch trial, if you were to get stay alive, you would have to confess that you were a witch. But when you were a witch, they would kill you. Either way, they would try to trick you into confessing that you were one. But if you say you weren't, that means you were lying and they would kill you.
Yeah. You know what? If you get accused of being a witch, there's just no good way out. No matter what happens, you're pretty much done for.
Call them a witch.
You're good. You just being a witch, you're dead.
Here, Nathan, go ahead.
So, back in the grammar levels, we were like, what's the name? The Classical Academy. And it says like Salem Witch Trial 1692. So now that date is like stuck in my head.
Oh.
So now I know whatever the
I don't remember that one.
witch trials happened.
We are rambling, but it's okay. We'll get back on track because we're not doing an outline together today. I went to Salem. When my kids were little, we had done, early American history, and so we went to Boston and Salem. And anyway, they have because they only, I'm sorry, it's only 19 people. 19 people were killed for witchcraft in Salem. Like, it wasn't hundreds of people, it was 19. And I'm not saying I don't care about the 19 people. I'm just saying it wasn't huge. But they have a bench, like in their city square, and they have the names of the people killed for witchcraft. They try to honor them. But they also have weird things where people dress up as witches and do like magic tricks in the streets, and very odd in Salem. Yes.
On your table, it looks like where the thing isn't locked in, so it might collapse at some point. Here, do you want me to fix it?
Oh, okay, yes. You mean this table, don't you?
Yes.
Is there something? I would like, thank you.
Yes.
I would so like that not to suddenly collapse on me. I didn't plan on climbing on it, but thank
I
you
just
so much.
saw it, it's crooked and I'm like, oh.
Okay, so let's talk about these Franks. These people who were practicing these things. They had a king eventually named Clovis, which is the first question I asked you. Who was Clovis? I just told you, right? He was a king of the Franks. How did he become a Christian? You wanna do it, Nathan?
Well, whenever his army was super close to getting defeated, he was like, God, if you really are there and you like help me win this battle, then I'll believe in you forever. And so God did help him win the battle. And then he like made a Christian nation. Or no, that was Charlemagne.
No, it was, you're right, you're on the right track. We even hear that he and 3,000 of his army were baptized.
That's like crazy.
Wasn't it
Like,
because
you
his
are
wife was a Christian?
daring Jesus.
Yes,
Well,
both answers are right. Just a second. So Oren, because we were talking, Oren said, is it because his wife was a Christian? Both these things are true. It says in Dorothy Mills, his army was near to destruction. He saw the danger, and he raised his eyes to heaven, saying, Jesus Christ, whom Clotilda, my wife, declares to be the Son of God, I beseech the glory of thy aid. Because she had been, you can imagine if she's a Christian and he's not, hopefully she wasn't nagging him, but she's probably going to bring it up. Clovis, the real God watches out for his own. The real God has power. Odin and Thor and the rest of that crew, I don't really think they're going to help you. I don't think they have power. So he heard this from her on a regular basis. But when it came down to it, and then he faced the enemy, like, okay, this looks bad. Jesus, if you're real and you can hear me, please help me. And he won the battle. Yeah, Jaden.
So it was actually, speaking of how he kind of dared Jesus to win the battle. Speaking of missionary, or one of the younger missionaries, he was about a teenager, went on a mission trip. Man, went on a mission trip.
That's okay.
And she came to Christ, but she said, Lord, I dare you to change my heart. And Lord, I dare you to make me become a follower. And it was like, that's
very bold.
Yeah. But
God is very gracious, isn't he?
yeah, and she came to Christ, and when it was time for her to leave, it was time for the second missionary, or the other missionaries to come. They were in tears because they wanted to stay because it crushed them that they were like all the people. It was in Haiti. Yeah, people were like they saw a girl come possessed by demons. Yeah. Here's a Bible verse that you probably don't hear talked about very much. Jesus said, I think I don't know if it's in the same area as the Sermon on the Mount, but he said, the kingdom of God moves forward by violence, and the violent bear it away. He obviously doesn't mean kill people if they won't become Christians. What does that mean? The kingdom advances through power, through force, through violence. And he says the violent, the energetic, they take it away. And he said to the Pharisees, these sinners, the scum of the earth that you're looking down on, Pharisees, they're grabbing the kingdom out from under you because they're coming. They're flinging themselves at Jesus' feet. They're grabbing hold of his cloak. And so there's a certain point where, if we want to follow him, we got to buck up and and take it. And God honors that. Now, does that mean all of us should go around daring God to do things? I don't think so. Because Jesus said, do not tempt the Lord thy God. Satan tried to get Jesus basically to dare God to turn stones into bread. And just an angels when he jumped off the temple, and Jesus said, we don't operate that way. But people who are just coming to God, they don't know him. Sometimes that boldness, that God honors that, and the violent bear it away. Yeah.
So you were saying, like, God obviously doesn't want us to kill people or anything, but because we're not Christians. But like last week we were doing Islamic book or whatever, what?
Yes.
is it called?
Yes, Quran.
Oh, okay. And you were talking about a passage where it says, kill people if they are not Muslims.
Yeah, well, okay, so now, people don't say this anymore, but I say things because they're true, like it's just history. I don't know how to whitewash history for you. The Muslims teach that it's okay to kill people if they're not believers, and they just do. That doesn't mean every Muslim you meet is murderous. My husband works for a Muslim, and he's just, I don't even know if he'd kill flies. He's a really nice guy. But in general, the religion says you can do that. Now, the problem, Oren, is the Christians have done it. And so, this is a lovely conversation. We're going to Charlemagne eventually. Here's the problem. When groups of people have decided in history, if you don't want Jesus, we are going to make you take Jesus. We will kill you if you don't. Okay, now when people look back at history and they see those episodes, they say, you Christians, you're wicked. Christianity is just as wicked as every other religion. Look what they did in the past. And they've given us all a bad name. Does that make sense to you guys? Those things that have happened in the past have given Christianity a bad name. But true Christians have never said we should go out and kill them if they won't become Christians. So I don't mean, when I say the kingdom advances by force or violence, don't misunderstand me. Jesus, when he said that, means the energy, like we wouldn't call it violence, but the force, when you want something really bad, you know what I mean? You'll do anything for it. You'll work hard, you'll slave, you'll get up early in the morning, you'll work. He said, that's the sort of people that carry away the kingdom of God. They want it so bad. Yeah, Nathan.
Okay, so, in Christian studies, I think it was in Christian studies, we learned about this, like, Muslim girl. And so she's, like, relatively peaceful.
Oh, yeah.
She goes to the mosque.
Sasha.
No. That's a Russian guy.
It's okay, let him finish.
But, anyway, my brother was kind of, like, talking about it, how, like, some Muslims are, like, yeah, peaceful, like how you're saying, and some Muslims are, like violent and terroristic. And Alex, like, my brother, he made up a good point, and he's like, well, that's their religion. Their religion is to be violent. Christianity is not supposed to be violent. So whenever they're peaceful, they're not doing their job as a Muslim.
Yes. I'm going to agree with what you said.
It's
Yes.
not wrong.
But that never gives us an excuse to persecute another group of people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So we need to be, I'm going to say better than that. No. We can't run around saying Muslims are wicked. God loves them. The Bible says God does not rejoice in the death of the sinner, but that they should come to know the truth and live. He doesn't rejoice in that. He wants them to know. So the high school students right now are reading a book about England. And it's a time when the British who lived in England already were Christians, and the Saxons came in and invaded. We talked about this. And the British didn't want to share the gospel with them. Those dirty, nasty Saxons, we hate them. We don't want them to have Jesus. And the book is about how this came back to bite them. It doesn't matter what we think of another group of people, they need Jesus. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
No matter what they teach or what they're doing. Yeah, do you want to say something else, Nathan?
So, dang it. I had,
Did it go away? Okay, Bentley, go ahead and then see if it comes up. Oh, okay. All right, if it comes back to you, tell me. Let's go back to Clovis though. So Clovis and the Franks became Christians. Now, Dorothy Mills doesn't tell you this, and this history's kind of complicated. Hey, Owen and Micah, are you with me?
Yeah.
You do it before you forget.
Okay, whenever you, like, see, like, a bad religion, don't, like, disrespect the person, just, like, disrespect the religion. Because, I mean, like, or hate the religion, not the person.
Yes.
Yeah,
And try to persuade them and pray for them.
So also never like do that also, because one time
I remember my sister said something about, or to a person about their religion, and she was younger, okay? She didn't know what she was talking about. She was saying like Muslim or Islam sucks, and a year later we learned that those people are becoming our neighbors. Yeah, and
We have to watch what we
they
say.
moved away like 2 years later, but
I say things to you guys because we're all sort of operating from the same point of view, a Christian point of view, that maybe I wouldn't say in the same way to people who weren't. Okay, so Clovis and the Franks became Christians. Now, here's where history gets tricky and complicated. A bunch of the other German groups had become Christians too. But the people who gave the gospel to them were heretics.
Oh.
This means that they called themselves Christians, but they didn't really believe it in the right way. The thing they didn't believe was that Jesus is really God. We call them Arians. Named for a guy named Arius. He taught that Jesus was created by God the Father. He was a creature, just like we're creatures. And God created him to do things for him. But he didn't always live. Okay?
Not Jewish.
That's what?
So they were Jewish.
Well, they get compared to the Jews a lot in the early Christian literature. So all the other German groups have become Arians, but the Franks became what we call Orthodox Christians. They believed Orthodox means right opinion, right teaching. So who liked the Franks? The church in Rome. The Pope liked the Franks. Because they weren't heretics, right? Because they believed the right way. Okay, so fast forward. Clovis dies,
Oh, no.
and there are other kings after Clovis, but they kind of died kings. They just didn't. I don't know. They just didn't do much, And they had second in command guys like prime minister sorts. They called it mayor of the palace. And they just had their mayor of the palace do everything. It's like, oh, mayor of the palace, go do this and that, because I'm eating, I don't know, I'm streaming Netflix and eating potato chips on the couch. I don't know what they're doing. They're not being king. So the mayors of the palace would go out. While this is going on, the Muslims we have just been talking about I didn't bring my map. I like to do this. This is my map of the Mediterranean. So just imagine, here's Africa, here's Italy, here's Greece, you got it? Okay. So the Muslims, here's France. The Muslims had come around in North Africa, popped over there to Spain, and come all the way into France. At this point, Muhammad has been dead about 100 years or something like that. By the way, fun fact. Because I love fun facts. All right, here's Africa. And here's Spain. Right? Okay? And there's just a little strait. Okay, Gibraltar. Thank you for saying Gibraltar, the Straits of Gibraltar. First of all, does anybody know what the ancient world called that? Like the Greeks and Romans had a name for it.
the Strait. Mediterranean.
The little thingies that go between Spain and Africa.
Portugal.
They're the Pillars of Hercules.
But there's no pillars there.
I know, but they're big rocks. Apparently Hercules had an adventure there. But anyway, here's why I brought this up. The Muslim general who sailed across and first stepped out onto land was named Tariq. Tariq. And the rocky place where he steps out is Jabal. Jabal al-Tariq. Jabal al-Tariq. Jabal al-Tariq. Gibraltar. That's really, it's people who can't speak Arabic mangling this. Every time we say Gibraltar, we're talking about the Muslim guy who first stepped out in Spain. Every time we say Gibraltar.
Cool.
Tariq. Jabal Tariq.
What happened to the I and the K?
I don't know. You know what? When we get lazy, do you know how we say things? We're lazy, right? Our mouths are lazy. So instead of saying, I am going to, we say,
You are going to.
I'm gonna, or we say, I'm gonna. Sometimes we say, I'm gonna go to Whitey's later.
Or you say
Sugar.
I'm gonna get a malt. Like, I'm gonna is not a word. I'm gonna. It's not, it means I am going to, but we're lazy. I'm gonna. So people just do this. Hey guys, they turn words into something easier to say. That's what happened in Gibraltar. Anyway, yes.
Or when you're saying Australia, but you don't want to say Australia, you just say Australia.
Australia. Or people even write this in papers. Sometimes we say cuz instead of because. Have you ever done this? I'm sure I don't think I've ever written it in a paper, but I've said it. Cuz. Why are you going to Whitey's? Because I want ice cream. Why else would I go to Whitey's? All right. So the mayor of the palace knows that the Muslims are on the way. The king doesn't go out with force because, it takes chips and Netflix. And so he sends Charles, his right-hand man, go deal with that. And at the city of Poitiers, they had a big battle, and Charles stopped the Muslims. They didn't go any further into France. Charles, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, got a nickname because he's so awesome.
Charles the Hummer.
Charles the Hammer. In Frankish, Charles Martel. Charles Martel. Charles the Hammer. Charles had I just did your second question. I'm sorry. I do this all the time. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll do the next one right. Charles had a son named Pepin. And Pepin looked around, and here's what went through Pepin's mind. You know what? The king does nothing. My dad saved the Franks. Well, the king did nothing. The current king does nothing. I do everything. You know what? The person who does everything ought to be king. Yeah. Why should I not be called king? I do all the work. Shouldn't I get the glory? So, next question. To whom did Pepin the Short? Unfortunately, he is Pepin the Short. Who do you turn to? Who? I think he was on the short side.
The Frankish chieftain.
Like 442.
But ultimately, Pepin went to somebody really important and said, the Pope. The Pope. It says, or he did go to his chieftains, but it says, by gaining the approval of the Pope. Pepin went to the Pope and said, look, we are very friendly to you because all these crazy people around us are heretic Arians and we believe the right thing. But look, I do all the work here. Why do I not get the glory and the palace and the money and the honor? I should be king. Shouldn't I be king? And the Pope says, yeah, you should. In fact, come here. I'm going to anoint you king over the Franks. The Pope stepped in and said, you know what? I can take away the guy who's now king, and I can make another king.
So the real king was the Pope.
The real king turned out to be very well said, Oren. The real power turned out to be the guy who can tell one person, you're not king anymore, and tell another person, yeah, come here. I'll set you up this case.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, because a lot of what we're going to talk about this year is a struggle. Who's more important, earthly kings or the church? Who should really be in charge? Should they be on the same level? Is one of them higher? If so, which one? Who's on top? This is a problem in the Middle Ages. And this is a step in that direction, when the Pope says, sure, Pepin, you can be king. So Pepin becomes king, And when he dies, he leaves his kingdom. A troublesome thing the Germans did, they didn't do the, I leave everything to the oldest son. They did the, I leave equal parts to all my sons.
Makes more sense though.
It's nice for the sons, but, okay, so remember the two brothers in the story of St. Patrick? Do brothers always get along?
No.
No. And so, you know what? I mean, if these guys are the sons of Pepin, all right? Congratulations.
Yeah.
You know, but Zachary, he's got to watch him. He should be. He's got a plan to take over all your parts. He's going to see you fall one by one. He's taking over the whole thing. It just sort of created tension in the family. But he left it. He had two sons, and he left it. But fortunately, not fortunately for him, but fortunately for everybody else, his son Parliament died fairly young, and then he wasn't in the picture. The remaining son was named Charles, just like his grandpa, Charles the Hammer. And Charles is who we're going to talk about here for a lot of the rest of our time together. Charles was so influential and powerful that he is one of the people in history that gets to be called the Great.
Yeah.
Pompey the Great, Alexander the Great. There's not very many of the greats. If you get the Great, you've made it. You've made it. But we don't usually say Charles the Great. We call him by his French name. Charlemagne. This comes from it came from Latin, Carolus Magnus. Carolus Magnus becomes Charlemagne because, as I'm sure you guys know, French is just sort of baby Latin. It's a descendant. It's the Latin's great-great-grandchild.
I feel like English is more of a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson, but it has a lot more stuff in it.
We have a lot more stuff in it. If the Normans hadn't invaded England, it would not have much Latin at all. But that's why English is so weird. Yes.
Where does the name English come from?
Angles.
English people.
Angles. They were one of the German people. They took over England, and it became Angleland. It's Angleland.
Like England is where the land full of.
They were from like Scandinavia and northern Europe, the Angles,
Angles.
but they ended up in England.
Like Angles.
Okay. This is my picture. This is a statue of Charlemagne.
It's so cool.
Okay, you do not need to critique this as a work of art. It's not the most detailed statue ever.
It looks
But-
cool. Like, how do you get a statue to get a big horse, okay, on 4 feet, and that statue is about 400 pounds of copper.
And you don't have that.
You know, do you have
They call these equestrian, you guys know equus means horse, right? Hey, equus means horse, so this is an equestrian statue because it's on a horse.
That must be
But one of the feet is lifted. You know, this is the tricky thing about doing equestrian statues. Sometimes they want to do it, where the horse is rearing up on its two legs.
Yeah,
But they've got to balance it. I know. A lot of effort. So this is Charlemagne. And this is the next question I asked you. According to his biographer, my high school kids are going to read his biography in a few weeks. I brought the 2 Lives of Charlemagne that they're going to read. What kind of person was Charlemagne? This was a very open-ended question. There's lots of answers.
He
Yes.
was very much like a warrior. He was tall, he was strong, he had blue eyes.
He kind of sounds like one of the Avengers, or like a perfect guy in the biography, doesn't he? Like he's tall, he's good looking, he's powerful, he's gracious, oh my goodness. Yeah, Asher.
Cheerful by intimidation.
He has a horse.
He has a horse. Yeah, in fact, I bet he has a lot of horses. Yeah, Jamie.
So his body was large and strong. His he was pretty tall, and his voice was strong. He was piety, generous, family affection, and he cared for education for his children.
Very well said. Unfortunately for Charlemagne, I'm going to talk about a couple of those things in depth, but talk about the education. It says in his biography here, that's on page 82 in your notebook, he tried to learn to write.
But he couldn't.
And for this purpose, he used to carry with him and keep under his pillow a tablet and writing sheets that he might in his spare moments accustom himself to the formation of letters. But he made little advance in this strange task, which was begun too late in life. He read, well, he Frankish and Latin, and he worked in Greek a little bit, but he just never could really learn to form the letters and write. You know, so here's what this does for me. It makes me feel better sometimes. We can't all be good at everything. We can't all be good at everything. Charlemagne built a kingdom, and he was well loved by a lot of people, but he wasn't. It's okay. So there's things I'm much older than you, but there's things I'm trying to learn to do, and I learn it much more slowly now. But I feel like, well, I can keep trying. So I have the equivalent of my little, study books under my pillow, whatever, in my spare time. Okay, I'm going to work on it. I may not ever be perfect at it, but I can get a little bit better. And I feel like that's a good attitude. That tells me something about Charlemagne, in other words. He didn't have to learn to write. Nobody's going to think less of him, but he wanted to. He wanted to make himself better, even though it was kind of a losing battle for him. Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting losing battles for myself too. So you mentioned warrior. Somebody said warrior. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. I didn't. Now, if your book looks like mine, you have a map on page 99 that has the area that Charlemagne eventually conquered. All right. If your book is not like mine and you have the map, don't worry about it. But so I'm going to do my kind of weird imaginary map here. I didn't bring my map because I don't have anywhere to hang it. Here.
Bring some binder clips.
What?
Bring some binder clips.
Well, what am I going to clip it to?
The top of the whiteboard.
I don't think there is a top of the. It's up against the wall. There's no back.
Bottom of the whiteboard.
Because that's what I used to clip it to last year. So, okay, this is going to be really bad. Spain.
I know how you feel.
Okay, this is just generally Europe. This is Italy, kind of, and this is Greece. I'm sorry, this is just really very bad. But it's I think Spain goes in a little bit more here. Okay. So these are the Franks. All right. 3 main areas he fought. First of all, up here to the north, Saxons. These crazy Saxons, they just wouldn't give up. Dorothy Mills tells us that he kept conquering them. And the minute he turned around and went back, they rebelled. The minute he turned, it's like naughty kids. That the minute mom leaves the room, you did the thing I just told you not to do, and mom has to come back. So he would go, and they would say, "Oh yes, we will become Christians. We will," and then they just ditch it. Okay, I'm not sure if it's with Charlemagne, but it's probably a similar thing. There's a story about a Germanic group becoming Christians, and they would go through it, so they would be baptized, and you give them, all through history, the church gave you a white robe after your baptism, and you wore it for some time. They anointed you with holy oil, and they put a white robe on you to show that you were newly baptized, and it was something we were very proud of. But then these Germans would come through, and they gave away all their white robes, So finally, this German guy comes in, and they didn't have any more. He's like, "Well, where's the white robe?" He says, "I've already been through this line twice and gotten 2 of them. I wanted another one." No, I don't think you understand how this works. So they kept rebelling, but he spent years campaigning and not only subduing them, It sounds mean, like Charlemagne's just going out and attacking innocent people. The Saxons kept attacking them. You see, I'm making excuses for Charlemagne. Okay,
They're amazing excuses.
other problem, these people called Lombards. Lombards were another Germanic group, and they had been over here, but they had taken over the northern part of Italy. And they kept attacking Italy, and they kept attacking Rome. They kept attacking the Pope. And the Pope, even back in Catherine's time, the Pope had said, hey, these Lombards are crazy. Would you come down here and deal with this? And Catherine went down and dealt with it. Then Charlemagne, his son, sometimes, the Lombards are back. Would you come deal with the Lombards? So he spent a lot of time fighting Lombards, really because the Pope asked him to, and if the Pope hold on to that thought, because it's going to become important in a minute.
Why does the shape of their country, or I guess I don't know, country or something, look like a buffalo?
Well, if you're basing your observations on my picture on the board, please base nothing on my picture.
Oh, okay.
And I know.
I'm
How does
just
that
deep
look like a
thinking
buffalo?
right now.
I see the buffalo. I think he's got an eye here, and maybe he's smiling.
I have no clue how that color looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the third area Charlemagne fought was in Spain.
That poor guy, he never had any teeth.
No, you know what? I'm going to read something to you about that in a minute. Don't remind me, Nathan. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about the poem that's in your book. Remind me. Say, talk about the part where he has no peace. Okay, I don't want to forget. Do you remember that Grandpa Charles the Hammer had beaten the Muslims back, maybe around here, they fought a battle. But most of Spain was Muslim. Hey, you guys, you listen?
Yeah, sure.
But not all of Spain. There were Christian kingdoms in Spain. And they would call Charlemagne in and say, can you help us fight against the Muslims? And he did. Now, his biographer tells a story. And it is this. Charlemagne left garrisons at strategic points along the frontier and went off himself with the largest force he could muster to invade Spain. He marched over a pass across the Pyrenees, which are the mountains that separate Spain from France, received the surrender of every single town and castle which he attacked, and then came back with his army safe and sound. Except for the fact that for a brief moment on the return journey, while he was in the Pyrenean mountain range itself, he was given a taste of Basque treachery. The Basques were a mountain people. Dense forests which stretch in all directions make this spot most suitable for setting ambushes. At a moment when Charlemagne's army was stretched out in a long column of march, as the nature of the local defiles forced it to be, these Basques, who had set their ambush on the very top of one of the mountains, came rushing down on the last part of the baggage train and the troops who were marching in support of the rear guard and so protecting the army which had gone on ahead. The Basques forced them down into the valley beneath, joined battle with them, and killed them to the last man. Then they snatched the baggage, and protected as they were by the cover of darkness, which was just beginning to fall, scattered in all directions without losing a moment. In this feat, Basques were helped by the lightness of their arms and the nature of the terrain. In this battle died Eggihard, who was in charge of the king's table, Anselm, the count of the palace, and Roland, lord of the Breton marches, along with a great number of others. The end. This is all we know. But for some strange reason, people fell in love with this story. And 400 years after this happened, it had grown to become this huge story about Roland and how awesome he was and why he died and how he got ambushed and how Charlemagne felt about it. And somebody wrote it down in a French poem. It's called the Song of Roland. And a bunch of your Dorothy Mills reading was from this Song of Roland. None of these things actually They got attacked in the Pyrenees, Roland died. Well, we know. But in the poem, it is turned into this big story. It's amazing. So Roland is this guy, and he's just really hot-headed. You know, he's one of these people that talks and he doesn't really think. He just says. And he has a relative named Ganelon. He's an uncle or a stepfather or something, and Ganelon hates him.
Of course.
We don't know why. He says at one point, Roland, he thinks Roland stole something from him. I don't know. He's just, Roland hates him. So Charlemagne is talking to them, and he says, hey, somebody needs to go talk to the Muslim king, Marsilion. I need to send somebody as an embassy to make peace. Who's going to go? And by the way, the last person we sent got brutally murdered there.
Oh, okay. I'll go. That's
So everybody's saying, I'll go, Charlemagne. He's like, no, you're too important. I'll go. No, you are too important. You must stay. So finally, Roland says, why don't you send Ganelon? Now, there's no indication that he did it because he didn't like him. He's like, well, you can send Ganelon.
I think not
Like, you dirty rat. I know you're setting me up. You're just sitting me there because you want to get rid of me. But I'll go. And so he goes. And he's traveling with a Muslim ambassador who's come to Charlemagne's court to retreat. So they're walking along, and Ganelon's like, yeah, hate Roland. You know, it'd be really nice if we could get rid of him. Wouldn't that be awesome? Charlemagne loves him. He's Charlemagne's right-hand man. It's like cutting off his right arm if we could get rid of Roland. Wonder, maybe we could do something about this. And the guy's like, I'll see what I can do. And so they get to the court of the Muslim king Marsilion. And sometimes in the poem they call him Marsil. Right? Marsil and Marsilion are the same guy. And Ganelon and Gwynes are the same guy. Okay, that starts with the same letter, it's the same guy. And Gwynes, fair sir, King Marsilion cries, what must I do to bring Roland to die? I'll tell you that, Count Ganelon replies. At Sizer Gate, the king will have arrived, leaving a rear guard to keep the pass behind. There'll be his nephew, Count Roland, the great knight. Oliver, too, on whom he most relies. 20,000 good Frenchmen at their side.
All right.
100,000 send of your Paynim kind. Paynim means pagan. And these shall first engage the French in fight. Of the French force, the loss will not be light. Yours will be slaughtered, and that'll not disguise. The like assault you'll launch a second time, and first or last, Roland will not get by. You will have done a deed of arms full fine. You'll ne'er again see war in all your life. Whoso should like the county Roland dead, from Carlon, or could Charles gather so great a host afresh? Our father's land would thus find peace and rest. When he heard this, Marsil fell on his neck, gave him a big hug, and straightway bade them unlock his treasure chests. Now, listen to this one. This is the last one I'm going to read for this section, and I love this. Then said Marsil, one thing alone remains. There's no good bond where there is no good faith. Give me your oath, Count Roland to betray. Gwynes replies, it shall be as you say. Upon the relics of his good sword Merglaise, he swear the treason and swear his faith away. So it happens. It happens just like he planned. Charlemagne puts Roland against his will, but Ganelon suggests it. Why do you put Roland in the rear guard? He can guard the back. Well, we stretch out and weave our way through the mountains, just like the founders said. So he's way in the back. Charlemagne's miles away. And here comes the Muslim horde. You know, in the history book, it's Basque people. In home Muslims. They come down in hordes, and these guys are killing. It's like 20 to 1 odds. You know what I mean? They have Archbishop Turpin with them. They have a holy man. He's killing people left and right too. They're fighting for their lives. And Roland has a horn. You know, not like a brass trumpet, but you know, like an animal horn, but a horn to blow. And this means bring me help. Okay. Roland's best friend Oliver says, Roland, blow the horn. Blow the horn. Charlemagne will hear there is still hope. And Roland's like, well, you know, kind of embarrassing to ask for help. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure we can take them.
Right.
Oliver asked him over and over, blow the horn. Roll it? No, I think well, they are being slaughtered. The odds are just too much. They're really good. But the odds are too much. Finally, it's down to just a handful of them. And Roland says, maybe I'll just blow that horn now. And this quote was in your book, but this is the most famous line in it. Roland is fierce, and Oliver is wise, and both for valor may bear away the prize. Once horsed and armed, the quarrel to the side, for dread of death the field will never fly. The counts are brave, their words are stern and high. Now the false paynims with wondrous fury ride. Quoth Oliver, look, Roland, they're in sight. Charles is far off, and these are very nigh. You would not sound your Oliphant. That's the report. You would not sound your Oliphant for pride. Had we the emperor, we should have been all right. To Spain, turn now and lift your eyes. See for yourself the rear guard's woeful plight. Who fights this day will never more see. Probably die. And they do. Roland blows the horn anyway. Like, well, yeah, we're probably all going to die. But we'll tell Charles that something's happening, and they'll come back and they will avenge us. They can get back to help us before all the enemies do. And he blows it. He blows it so hard, he bursts blood vessels in his brain.
What in the world?
I mean, he really blows hard. And then he picks up his sword and he's fighting. It's Oliver falls and he's dying and he's like he can't see anymore either because he's so wounded or blood in his eyes or whatever. And he hears somebody coming to him and he just starts slashing with his sword and it's rolling. He says, "Dude, it's me. It's me. Are you mad at me?" And he said, "No. I didn't know it was you." And he sits there over his dear friend Oliver. And he's fighting. So he had told Charles, if you ever find me dead on a battlefield, with my last steps, I will walk towards the enemy, and you will see me falling towards the enemy. I will never be back in the back. I will always be in the front. So Charles hears the horn, and Ganelon's like, oh no, it's like when they test the warning signals on Tuesdays. It's just a test. Charles was like, no, something's bad. And they went back. Dead bodies everywhere. And Charles said, he always told me to look towards the enemy. Look at, and he was. He wandered out. He had his faithful sword. He was like, sword, I never ever want Muslim pagans to wield you. And he tries to hit it against a rock to break it so no one can ever use it again. He can't, it's too weak. Mind you, he didn't get wounded. Blood vessel first, right? Nobody kills Roland. And he dies there, he falls. And Charles comes and he weeps over him. Well, I mean, to wind it down, they wipe out tons of the Muslims who are free, including King Marcelion's son. And ends up and wound him. He ends up dying. They all and the queen says she will become a Christian. But the end of the poem is we got to deal with Dirty Rotten Ganelon. We know what you did. We so know what you did. And they do a confrontation. Right? They get witnesses. He gets family members to say, "Oh, Ganelon's fine," and the other side says, "We'll buy that." They're like, "Okay, how about the duel?" But Ganelon won't fight for himself. He's like, I'm getting the champion of my family, fight. And somebody in Roland's family fights, of course, Ganelon's family member dies. Roland is avenged, and Ganelon and his family members are horribly executed. Now, how he's always fighting. I remembered without your helping me. I can't believe it. That's okay. You make me feel better about myself. Okay. This is the very end of the poem, and it's just sort of depressing. I don't know. The emperor now has ended his eyes, That means that the trial, the court, everything began on. With justice done, his great wrath satisfied, and Brandamanda, the Muslim queen, brought to the fold of Christ. The day departs and evening turns to night. The king's abed in vaulted chamber high. Saint Gabriel comes, God's courier to his side. Up, Charles, assemble thy whole imperial might. With force and arms unto Elvira ride. Needs must thou succor King Vivian where he lies, and be his city besieged by Canaan tribes. There for thy help the Christians call and cry. Small heart had Carlon to journey and to fight. God, says the king, how weary is my life. He weeps, he plucks his flowing beard in white. The end. Yes. Oh, how weary is my life. I have to do this on and on. I fight and I fight and I fight. Thank you for listening. This is an amazing instance of some small event in history that turned into something huge. Everybody writes about Ganelon and Roland and Oliver. He became famous in history. These guys that we really don't know much about them in actuality. Okay. Oh, and I just blew up the next question, but it's okay. What famous poem arose from the events of Charlemagne's campaign in Spain? Song of Roland, the Song of Roland. Okay, so remember the Lombards? Remember the Lombards? They kept giving the Pope a hard time, and the Pope kept saying, would you please come deal with the Lombards? They did it again. In fact, it was really, really bad. Somebody accused the Pope of doing something wrong or illegal. We don't even know what it was. Some sort of immorality. And he said he was innocent. But they came after him. They were going to poke out his eyes and cut out his tongue.
Whoa.
I know.
No.
I'd rather just die.
Punishments on the Bill of Rights.
And he got away. And he ran to Charlemagne. And he said, we got to do something about these Lombards. So Charlemagne packs it up, he marches down there, and he whoops up on the Lombards. All right? Puts the Pope back on the throne. He happens to still be there, and it's Christmas. It's Christmas in the year 800. And Charlemagne's a church just like everybody else. It's Christmas. And the story is he didn't know what was going to happen when he went there. That's what we're going to go with. People argue about this, but he didn't know. He came to church, came to Mass, and after Mass, the Pope comes out with a crown. He crowns him not king. He crowns him emperor. Hello. There's an emperor already over here. Remember, who doesn't really like what? Well, calling him emperor. He's just nobody. Like they live in the line in Edoras in Lord of the Rings, like rolling around on the floor in the dirt with their reeking dogs or whatever. You're like you're nobody. We're the emperor. I'm the emperor now, says Charlemagne. He took it very seriously. He says he didn't know. Like it wasn't a setup, that the Pope just decided to do this. The Iron Crown of the Lombard kings, the Iron Crown supposedly had in it one of the nails from the crucifix of Jesus. That was the rumor. Rumor had it that one of these was they called the Iron Crown pioneer. And it gave him the crown. And now, for a while, there is going to be what was called the Holy Roman Empire. It was a revival of the empire. And it was a high point. Until Charlemagne died, he started schools. He sent to Britain, and he said, I want your best teachers, your best and your brightest to come teach kids, any kids. It doesn't have to be noble kids. It could be any kids. I mean, you can send your kids to school. We'll teach them to read. It'll be awesome. He started schools, art, learning, literature, set up monasteries all over. It was great. And then it wasn't, because Charlemagne died, and his sons and grandsons fought over the empire and fought each other, and fall apart again. But for a moment, it's going to be back. So don't grieve too much. The Holy Roman Empire will pop back up. But for a little while, it seemed like it was gone. Yeah, Nathan.
So, I'm pretty sure, a lot of the Muslims have been like practicing literature and stuff around that time. So he took a lot of Muslim teachers.
Yes.
And he educated the nation, I guess.
He educated the nation. He had very high ideals, but we don't live forever. And his kids weren't like him. His grandkids weren't exactly like him. So there's the story shown. It does happen a lot in history.
There was like this great girl and his kids just.
And these
like,
kids are duds. We see it over and over in the Bible. David had dud kids. Eli, the high priest, his sons were marauders. Samuel, the final one of the judges. You know, the people came to him and said, "We want a king because your sons do not walk in your ways." It's a sad story.
Alexander the Great.
Well, except his kid was not born yet. She was pregnant. Rexina was pregnant, but anyway, they let him live 12 years before they killed him. But he had generals. They had generals that fought. Yeah. Okay, so what I want you to do for next week is read chapter 6, but only parts 1 through 3. You know how in the Dorothy Mills book it has, part numbers in the chapters? We're just reading parts 1 through 3. It's not very much reading this week.
Wait, so what page?
Oh, I will tell you that. I don't know. I didn't write down the pages. 100 through 107. 100 through 107. If your book looks like mine. But it's chapter 6, parts 1 through 3.
Wait, oh.
It's really short this week. The Charlemagne chapter was really long, but this chapter's really short. We have a little bit of time, and I want to talk about the Arabian Nights. You guys read the story of Aladdin this week. Did anything in it surprise you that it was different than what you expected? Yeah,
They completely changed the story, or I guess the Disney version did. Like this, it was not at all like it. They never got a
tell me
chance
something big that seemed different to you.
Disney made it.
Yeah, but
the palace got stolen from him.
yeah, that was really weird. That he built a palace. The genie built him a palace, but then Jafar, they don't call him Jafar in this one, but Jafar has been called. There's been a Jafar in other stories. Yeah, he just moved the palace. That was a big difference.
In the Disney version, they got huge emphasis on the carpet. But from what I remember, it's just, they got him his magical carpet and went to his house. And that's all they say about it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, he flies on
And he sings on it. It's just
Why do you think that when they make movies and things like this, they change things like that? Or they expand?
The actual story is boring.
Okay, I don't know that this story is boring, but okay, I hear a whole new world being sung. So sometimes it's because we think it will be a charming moment and we want to make a musical out of it. Sometimes we just think it makes the characters more sympathetic. For example, in the story, does Aladdin have a mother?
No.
Wait,
Oh yeah. But he's an orphan in the other
He's an
one.
orphan in the other one. Why? Because we feel sorry for orphans. Yeah, and in the story, he's a bit of a slacker. And in the movie, he's like, oh, I'm doing the best I can, I have to steal to, eat, but I'm an orphan, I live on the streets. So it makes us feel a little better about him, maybe.
Makes us feel like stealing is justified.
It does make us feel his stealing is justified. But in this case, I wouldn't feel, he's not stealing, he's not on the street stealing in this version either, is he?
Just
He
make
ain't doing nothing.
He's just not doing anything, exactly.
Also, if you think about it, because Disney's the most famous movie, most Disney movies follow the same pattern. So by changing the, like, it's usually an orphan, you feel sorry for him, somehow gets in the power or something like that, then something bad happens, but then there's a girl, and then he or she's redeemed, and everything's alright.
Or
So
there's
if they
from
change
the
it to
original
this thing,
one,
which is a little different, it doesn't, it's not a
it's always like,
vibe or whatever I call it.
and then they like,
Fit with the pattern of
totally never have any problems with their
I would like
job.
to ask you something. So we read about Aladdin. We also read about New Redden and the Fair Persian. If you remember, New Redden is the guy his dad is an important guy. They were going to buy a slave, like the most beautiful, educated slave for the caliph or the king, and then New Redden fell in love with her, and they ran off together. And anyway, he had ups and downs, but the Grand Vizier was always after him. He was always going to bring him down, but he always seemed to come out okay. We also read about Prince Camaralzaman. I don't know. He has a lot of letters in his name. He's the guy who ends up, he falls in love with the Indian princess, except that they magicked them together, and now he's looking for her. And all these adventures. Do Aladdin and Redden and Camaralzaman, do they come out on top at the end? Is their story involved? Yeah. I mean, everything, and then he was made king and he lived happily ever after. And then Aladdin got his lamp back and he killed the evil, magician and they lived happily ever
And
after.
the live action, he just throws them away.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and
He
then
turns
the
into
Disney
another
one, in the
genie.
new Disney one, he turns into a genie and solves them.
Yes, I think that happened in the animated one too. That Jafar turned into a genie and then they trapped him in the bottle.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I've noticed. And not just me, a lot of people have noticed this. There seem to be a lot of stories about someone from humble beginnings. This would be Aladdin, not so much New Redden or Camaralzaman because they were nobles, But like Aladdin, often they don't have parents, and Aladdin's dad was not in the picture. It was just he and his mom. Can you think of other stories from anywhere where a kid from humble beginnings who may or may not really know his parents or have both his parents finds out he has a destiny or a fate or something much bigger than he possibly imagined? Harry Potter. Beautiful example. Harry Potter is an orphan.
When he looks at the mirror, I'm pretty sure it was the first I was thinking it was when he looked at the mirror.
He grows up, what is he, 10 or 11 when he gets the Hogwarts message? Initially 11. And so he's grown up his whole childhood, living under the stairs in the closet and not thinking he's anybody. And what is he? I'm sorry if this is a spoiler. He's destined to save the world from Voldemort. This is his destiny, but he's a nobody to begin with. What do you think?
The entire Hobbit Mother series.
Okay, well, the Hobbits. Bilbo is nobody. I mean, he's a wealthy Hobbit, granted, but and we're going to read. I'm not going to say too much because we're going to read. So those of you who have read them, but he finds out he's got a mission that he never would have dreamed of, and so does his nephew Frodo. He found out there's a mission, but they just thought they were just normal. How about Luke Skywalker? Luke Skywalker is an orphan. He doesn't really know who his parents actually are while he's growing up with Uncle Owen and Aunt Prue. And suddenly he finds out he also has a mission to save the universe from something. You thinking of another one, Nathan?
Oh, yes, the horse and his boy.
Yes, a Shasta. Is his name Shasta? Do I remember this? He's nobody. He's nobody. He's just a slave boy. But he's got a mission to accomplish that's going to have huge repercussions.
Supposedly the line where Darth Vader says, "I am your father," is even in the movie.
Yeah.
And the line where he does explain that he's his father is actually ad-libbed.
Oh.
And no, apparently he wasn't even supposed to say that, but they kept it.
Well, as a slight digression and to warn you against spoiling other people's fun. So I was in fifth grade. I was in fifth grade when these were coming out, and somebody in my class went to see Empire Strikes Back, and they told me. And they told me. You know, Darth Vader is. Thank you so much for. Like, I was gonna go see that.
I mean, yeah, because like,
Couldn't do that
I like know everything is kind of like not a big whatever, oh, you'll pop it. But if it's just coming out and it's like a big cliffhanger, then I would want
Please don't tell people. It's just not kind.
Like,
yeah,
give a shake.
But here's my point. There seem to be a lot of stories. No, I'm gonna throw some. I'm not implying that I think these stories I'm about to talk about are not true, but they're stories. Joseph, he's not an orphan, although his mother is dead. But he gets sold to Egypt. He's in prison. No one looks at this kid, including his brothers, and thinks he has a mission. He's going to save the Middle East from the famine. He's going to be put in the right place at the right time. Moses is not from a particularly important Israelite family. I mean, they are a priestly family, but they're slaves. Moses gets put in a basket, for crying out loud. No one in their wildest dreams was looking at that baby and thinking he's going to save his people from slavery, and God is going to speak to him face to face to the fact that his face glows. And I wonder,
His mother knew.
we have to say this one. But here's the thing. I wonder, that this story, important sort of story, that you can't judge by appearances. In the Aladdin movie, they refer to him as a diamond in the rough, okay? A diamond that's not been cut and polished, and you can't tell because the most important story that was ever going to happen was the same story. Jesus' father is not Joseph. And there were rumors surrounding him. You know there were. And everybody who came, even the wise men, they seemed to know something was up. Did the shepherds really understand totally? They saw angels. We know for a fact the kids he grew up with, including his own brothers, they didn't get it. But you're nobody. You're nobody. Oh God. Sometimes we do not see under the surface. Aladdin and Joseph and Mowgli in the Jungle Book stories, Romulus and Remus, babies thrown out and raised by shepherds. Just even found Rome.
I thought it was raised by a wolf.
Well, only for a little while, and then the shepherds they got him over the hunger for it, and then a shepherd named Faustulus found him.
Wasn't Alexander the Great, like, the stories about him too?
There were stories that his father was from God.
Or, well, like, he was given to a shepherd and then raised, and then he did the whole horse thing.
No, he always knew his dad was God.
Yeah, I'm thinking something else.
Anyway, I'm gonna put for your consideration the idea that sometimes there's stories that circulate and they all have the same feel, and it's because it's something we long for in our hearts, but we don't know what we're longing for. And then Jesus came and he showed us what we're longing for. We were longing for the nobody, the orphan, because I don't know, is Joseph dad? I don't know, is Joseph really dad? To do something that no one ever imagined. It's just interesting that we like that sort of story, and we still do. Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, we love that story because, I'm going to say this carefully, because it's a true story. I'm not saying Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker are true stories. I'm saying the idea that the lowly are exalted because it says Jesus humbled himself, poured himself out, but that he was given the name that is above every name. And these little stories give us a glimpse of the big story. I would like you to finish the Arabian Nights for next week. Bring me your outline and read that very short amount. Next week it's the Vikings. Oh, we love the Vikings. And I have a board game. We don't have time. We can't play it together because of time. but I'm gonna give each of you a copy and show you how to play it, a Viking board game that you can take home and cut the pieces out and make yourself and play. And astound your friends. All right, you may go. See you next week. Leave your game card.
We're too young to have skill.